Hi, this is 100 and 100, where we are reviewing 100 VR games in 100 days. Today we are looking at VR robots, or VRobots. VRobots is a really interesting game that has you playing the role of a robot whose job it is to destroy or undo what other evil robots have done. You've been built by humans to go and reclaim all of these cities that have been overrun by the bad robots. We're excited to jump into this one with you today and show you what it's all about. In our VR Gear game reviews, we cover as many aspects of the game as possible so that you can make an informed decision before you try or buy one of these VR titles. We're excited to look at VRobots with you, and let's start out by looking at getting up and running with this game. You'll be able to find VRobots in any of the virtual reality stores, and it is currently selling for $14.99 on most of them, but it is selling for $9.99 currently on the Oculus store. Who knows how long that'll last, but there is a price difference when you do buy on Oculus. The download file is about 2 gigabytes in size, and installation is pretty automatic, and you'll be able to jump right into the game's main menu after installation is complete. The main menu of the game is a control center where you're standing above a virtual map that has little models of cities lined in a progression from left to right. As you select one of the cities that you're going to play in, that will bring you into that city, and that is one of the levels of the game where you will be responsible for destroying different buildings as they present themselves to you by turning blue or green. As the buildings glow blue or green, you grab and throw, or you smash with a tool, or you send out a whirlwind to suck up the neighborhood. All of this has to be done before the time runs out. Once the time runs out, you're given a final score, and then you exit the level and move on to the next one. One missing element of this game was some sort of opponent that was trying to stop you. There was a robot that did show up in one of the levels that would try to take the buildings that you threw and put them back where they were originally. But outside of that, there was no resistance to your efforts to destroy these cities, and so you were kind of left to do basically whatever you wanted until time ran out. Even hitting buildings you weren't supposed to awarded you points, and so it was somewhat confusing how to succeed. Obviously, getting the buildings that were glowing before they stopped glowing would give you more points, but overall, destroying the entire city was not bad either. Having said that, we did have fun picking up buildings, plucking airplanes from the sky, throwing delivery trucks, and breaking boats over the top of bridges. There's a lot of cool destructive things you can do in this game, and we think you'll enjoy it. This game is a first-person puzzle, adventure, destruction game. You aren't fighting anybody, you're just destroying things, and you'll teleport from one spot to the other on the island or on the city platform that you're playing on, destroying things left and right, and then time runs out. So it is a timed puzzler, adventure, robot destruction game, if that is a genre for you. You'll play this game from the first-person perspective as a robot character, and you will be that robot character even when you're in the main menu. Your hands are robot hands, and in the game, your hands are robot hands, or they are the different tools that you're given. There is a Thor hammer, there is a whirlwind applicator, there is a tractor beam that brings things close by, and there is some sort of grab and pull and push type tool that allows you to launch buildings really far, which was a lot of fun. But the game is played from a first-person perspective. You won't see much more than your hands in the game or the tools you're using, but that's how you'll play the game. For theme and story, the game starts out by explaining to you in very simple terms that the humans built a giant robot, which is you, to reclaim their cities from other robots. And then after that, there's not much more to the story. In between levels, there's no story that brings you from one place to the next. You are engaged with the fact that You get to play with some really cool weapons on the next level. That was our motivation to move from level to level. We saw that Thor hammer about halfway through and we had to go use it. Further down, there was a gigantic sword that was available once you got to that level. That motivated us to move forward. But there was no clear story that we were part of. There was no narrative that kind of strung us through the levels and tied everything together. There might be at the very, very end. We have a few levels to go till we're there, but there was no clear story here. And the theme was destroy cities to save the people. The controls in this game are very simple. Teleportation can be used with the joysticks or the touchpads, depending on the controller that you have. And to pick things up, you use the trigger. The other control input is the grip. If you have the Thor hammer, for example, or if you have the sword that I mentioned earlier, having the hammer engage with lightning to be included as you throw the hammer requires you to squeeze the grip, and making the sword appear required you to squeeze the grip. Everything else is triggers to grab and swinging your controllers in the air in a throwing motion to launch things across the level. There was an interesting difference in the way that you would throw something. For example, the Thor hammer was not something that would release from your hand until you push the trigger. Typically, when you throw in games, the release happens when you release a trigger. In this game, the release only happened once you pulled the trigger, so we had to unlearn what was natural and learn what was unnatural in this throwing to do it properly. I'm pretty sure if I jump back into the game, I'd make the same mistake again because it's more natural to release the trigger when throwing than to press the trigger when throwing. All said, that is the controller input for this game. Pretty simple and pretty easy to interact with if you can get the throwing mechanics down right. For music and sound, this game was around average, a little above average. There were sound effects, of course, when you would crash buildings together or throw them into the water, you could hear a splash. There were planes flying overhead and you could hear those. But there was a missing depth to the audio that we would have really liked to see, especially when the opponent robot came in and tried to stop you from doing what you were tasked with doing, which was destroying the city. It would have been nice to hear more audio coming from that. It would have been nice to have some theme music that got more intense as the level got more difficult. It also would have been nice to have audio cues that told us how close we were to time running out. Or for that matter, any visual cues that would tell us how much time was left before time ran out. All told, there was not as much audio and it wasn't as rich as we wanted it to be. There was some good audio and it was a little above average, but it wasn't something that we really found compelling about this game. And we really wish that there was more. It would really enhance this type of environment, especially since you're going from one city to the next. It would be great for the audio and the ambiance of the city to be mapped to the gameplay in some way. You see the Statue of Liberty, you see New York, San Francisco, but you don't hear anything that would resemble those places. You don't really hear the busy streets, the bustling of people moving back and forth, or boats in the harbor in a way that you would want to hear it. And so there's a lot of opportunity here for a more rich audio experience that we hope the game developers adopt. For player movement, we really enjoyed moving around in this game. This game adopted the teleportation method of movement, and it also adopted the teleport and rotate, but not to the extent as other games have. You aren't able to rotate any further than your arm is able to rotate from your shoulder. For example, I was able to teleport and rotate to the right, but only so far as I could twist my arm. You aren't able to rotate using the joystick or touchpads as your rotation input. The rotation input for your landing is all bound with how much you rotate your controller. And so this prevented you from rotating and doing a full 180 and becoming disoriented. Some of you might be used to that or actually prefer that because it gives you more mobility, but that type of movement can be pretty difficult for people newer to VR and can be disruptive and disorienting. For motion sickness, this game, you are moving around in the world, and as you sense yourself getting closer to the end of the time limit, you start moving really fast, and the game doesn't prevent you from moving fast. You're able to teleport, move, rotate, and reach and grab and break buildings and things like that, all really fast, and the game enables that just as fast as you're able to do the inputs. As a result, motion sickness is a very real issue when you're in a game like this because of the type of movement. For environment and immersion, we felt like this game was a lot of fun. It got kind of redundant. If you got bored with, breaking cities, if you don't like playing the role of Godzilla without any opponents, no one was actually trying to stop us or help us or give us any feedback while we're playing the game. It got kind of redundant as we stayed in the game longer, but the environment was a lot of fun. All the buildings would fall apart when you would crash them. You could pick them up and throw them. You could grab airplanes out of the air, grab boats out of the water, and you could just wreak havoc anywhere that you saw a building or a boat or a person or a car. As a result, the game was very immersive in that regard, and the environment was quite fun to be in. We enjoyed the game, and we think it's a great place for people who are newer to VR to get in and get used to the mechanics of moving around and interacting in a virtual reality environment. All right, so let's take a look at the overall scorecard for VRobot, or VRobot. For theme and story, we're giving this game a 6 out of 10. There wasn't a clear storyline, and the theme wasn't much more than a commissioning of a robot, who you're playing in the game, to reclaim cities from rogue robots. And to do that, you just break stuff. So without a clear storyline and a somewhat confusing theme, this game is getting a slightly above average score of a 6 out of 10. For controls, we're giving this game an 8 out of 10. The controls were really simple to use. They really were helpful as you're interacting with the world, and you could get a lot done and remember them pretty well. The only issue we had here, and there's some points lost for the confusion around throwing items, where you needed to pull the trigger to release rather than release the trigger to release an item as you threw it. So an 8 out of 10 for controls. For music and sound, we're giving this game a 6 out of 10. The game has a lot of room for improvement here. We wish there was a lot more specific audio tied to different things that you were doing in the game. There was the sound of airplanes and water would splash when you throw a building in there, but there wasn't a lot of diversity in the sound when there's a huge opportunity for that as you are playing in these different cityscapes. So a 6 out of 10 for music and sound. For player movement, we're giving this game a very good score of 8 out of 10, and that's because the game is implementing a really neat teleportation mechanism that allows you to rotate only as far as your arm can rotate, which results in a minimizing of motion sickness as well as a continuity in the direction that you're facing. So we really like that. An 8 out of 10 for player movement. And for motion sickness, we were giving this game a really high score of an 8 out of 10. And this is a score that is rarely given to games that do teleportation, but this game did teleportation in a way that reduced the amount of motion sickness that you would experience when landing at the end of a teleportation. You could rotate while teleporting, but you were limited. As a result, your orientation was maintained to a degree, and that definitely minimized motion sickness, allowing this game to get an 8 out of 10 for motion sickness. For environment and immersion, this game also gets a really great score of an 8 out of 10. We felt like the environment was fun to be in, everything was interactive, and we felt like we could stay in the game for a while. In fact, the time would run out and we could leave a level, but we would stay anyway because we wanted to keep breaking buildings, throwing boats, tearing down bridges, and just messing with stuff because the game let you do all of this. And so the very interactive environment made for a very immersive experience. And now for the overall score for VRobot, we're giving this game a great score of a 7.3 out of 10. This game was a lot of fun to go in and be a robot whose job is to reclaim a city for the people that built you by destroying the city. Kind of confusing, but definitely a lot of fun. It's a great game for people new to VR who would like to get in and figure out or experience what virtual reality can bring, which includes interacting with a lot of different stuff and seeing worlds that you couldn't see without virtual reality. So this game is available on all the different virtual reality stores. It's cheapest through the Oculus store. It's also part of the Viveport Infinity subscription, so you can get this game just about anywhere. This has been 100 in 100, where we are reviewing 100 VR games in 100 days. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell so that you can be notified tomorrow when we release another VR game review. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next one.